Hello friends, welcome back to Chapter 2 of these music notes, during which I would like to explore in more detail the musical language of Olivier Messiaen, and in particular two pieces that I have pre-recorded for this coming weekend's service. These two works come from a set of 4 pieces, or meditations, that Messiaen wrote in 1932. He originally scored them for orchestra and then later transcribed them for the organ. And the works are inspired from the Feast of the Ascension, and this is a liturgical service during the season of Easter, in which the Christian Church observes the story of Christ's ascension to heaven, and the words that Christ exhorts his disciples with to go forth and preach the gospel of peace to all the world. Messiaen derives inspiration from the idea of ascension, not only Christ's ascension, but also the human spirit that longs to ascend as well. The prayers that ascend, the longing that ascends, and the life that ascends. And he finds many musical ways to describe this ascent within these pieces. Before we get into the content of the works themselves, a few words about the musical language in general. It's important for all of us that we set aside our musical expectations. Music is indeed a language that is formulated along the building blocks of melody, rhythm, and harmony. Melodies that tend to go where we expect them to go. Harmonies that fit into rules and follow progressions that we expect, and rhythms that march along right in order to which we can tap our foot. Messiaen, along with many composers in the early 20th century, challenged these ideas, challenged the orthodoxy of all of these musical rules, and began to redefine them and to explore other nuances within musical language that could express other ideas that sometimes are mysterious to us, that challenge our expectations, can even make us feel uncomfortable, or could take us to just a new plateau of musical thought and awareness. That's what he's trying to achieve here. So I challenge you to lay aside your musical preconceptions, the things that make you feel comfortable, and open yourself to considering some other ideas, some alternative forms of expression. The 2 central movements here are entitled Serene Alleluias and Outbursts of Joy. And I'm particularly drawn to this idea of the Alleluia as being something serene. It's not something we associate often together. Alleluia we think of as something quite jubilant. Not that this music is sad, but it is still, it encourages a sense of calm in us. Well, how does Messiaen achieve this? The work begins like this, with a single melodic line that bursts forth in an ascending arpeggio. Messiaen groups his melodies in what he referred to as augmenting or enlarging or diminishing or getting smaller groups. He derived his inspiration from Gregorian chant, a very old form of musical singing that was in the medieval Christian church, in which melodies would be grouped in rhythms of 3s and 2s and 5s. Not so much like the ordered rhythms that we're used to today, much more asymmetrical. He believed that this asymmetry, or this flexibility, was much more natural. He said rhythm shouldn't be equally divided like marching band music. It should be more free. It should be in different groupings of different sizes. like the asymmetry in the movement of the trees in the wind, or the movement of the water in the brook, or the asymmetry even in the lunar cycle and the solar system. This is how he organizes his rhythms. It begins with just this simple melody. He organizes the piece much like a song. It has a stanza that is divided into two parts. You heard the opening melody that is centered on the key of F. The second part of the first stanza is centered on a sustained note of C. And above this, the second part of the melody. We have these two parts, and both of them encourage us to be still, to not be tapping our foot, but to be listening and meditating in alleluias that are serene. He organizes this then by a repetition of these melodies, but he adds to them other elements, other kind of chordal elements, harmonic elements that explore a kind of polytonality. The second repetition of the tune is juxtaposed against what he calls chords of resonance. These harmonies aren't functioning with expectations to guide us to certain places. They are providing color, much like sunlight coming in from a window against the tapestry of the music. The second part of the stanza has its own unique, beautiful coloring, this time in a beautiful registration of the organ on the string stops. This continues and it develops and it ascends with trills and more harmonies and other textures, but then it calms down again back to the stasis of the C within F major. And then ascending or descending all the way down to the bass. The work ends with a final repetition of the first part of the melody, but it is juxtaposed against two beautiful ideas. One is a trilling chord, and the other is like a chirping bird or drops of water. These two things work together, and for me, it's very picturesque. It's more than just the text, but it brings a kind of natural landscape into the expression, like a beautiful spring day with rain falling, the green emerging from the trees, and the sunlight coming from behind it, all in this counterpoint of nature, in which we find an alleluia that is serene and beautiful. The third movement is entitled Outbursts of Joy. What are these outbursts? Messiaen, like many of the romantics of the 19th century, explores the very limits of music. In this particular piece, he registers it for the full resources of the organ, the very summit of its sound, also the full resources of technique, of what a person can physically do, speed, and sound all work together to just whip forth, open your heart with these just ecstatic outbursts and profound outbursts of joy. The work starts like this. Wow. Perhaps not everyone hears that as joyful. But again, let's reorient our thinking. Within these harmonies are some secrets to Messiaen's musical language. If we take away some of the notes within these chords, you find chords that are actually quite simple. I've removed just one note. Well, Messiaen, like many other composers in this period, likes to add something to the harmony, like a spice in a recipe to give it a little more flavor. He even describes it as the bee in the flower. So to this beautiful, simple harmony, he adds this note, and he puts it together. And it's just a little more resonant. It has color, it has life, it wakes us up. So rather than something that's kind of normal, he spices it up. Then we get a melody in the pedal. That's a pretty common major chord that centers us in the key of F sharp. If you remember, the same key as the choral anthem for the day, the key of love. This particular melody organizes the whole piece. It's a little unusual, isn't it? Messiaen derived this melody from a Russian source. He was inspired by the opera by Mussorgsky entitled Boris Gudenov. And at the very opening of this opera, the orchestra plays a theme that Messiaen quoted throughout his life. Pretty regular. Rather kind of a folk song. But he was drawn to this theme, and he uses it everywhere in his music, but he transforms it. He augments it, rather than just the simple tune. Here, he changes it. He lowers it and extends it. And we hear this theme throughout the piece. In chords, we're back in the pedal. And you have many outbursts of chords. Like a person who just cannot contain the joy that is within them. It goes back and forth between these kind of disjunct ideas with lots of space and resonance in between. It's presented in three parts. The opening, outbursts, then are kind of transposed even higher. And we have even more outbursts that get longer and less contained. Then following this central section, we have the combination of the two. We have the melody in the pedal against all of these outbursts of chords. This just continues and continues to build until we get one final outburst, and that is this theme as fast as one can possibly play it. And it it just goes all the way, skipping like stones across the water to the very end of the piece. Now that is joy. Perhaps expressed differently than what you're used to. But I hope you'll listen and you'll open yourself up to a new form of expression, one that challenges our expectation, challenges orthodoxy, but within it has a very profound meaning. Thanks.